So now that we are collecting that data entered by the user, the next step is to derive those results. And of course, for that, I provided you with this investment results TypeScript file, which contains some code where you can use those captured input values to derive the annual data, which should be output in the table. Now, the question is where we want to use that code, though. And here we got two main options, and I'll show you both, because it's always good to know about alternatives, and there is no clear right or wrong path, though I will also tell you what my personal preference is. But the two options are essentially that we put this code into the to be added investment results component, for example, or into the app component, for example, and that we make sure that we pass this gathered input data to the component that performs these calculations, and that we then pass the result of these calculations to the component that outputs them. Or the alternative approach would be to use a service. Now, using the service has certain advantages and would be my preference, and you'll see the advantages soon. But since you should know about both approaches and the different Angular features you'll need to use to implement these two different approaches, I'll show you both approaches. And I'll start with the in-component calculation before we then thereafter implement the service. And here, I want to derive my annual results, which should be output in that table, in this app component here. So in the end, I want to put this code here into the app component. So we can copy it as a method without the function keyword, for example. Though I also need to bring the return statement along, but we can copy this without the function keyword into this app component TypeScript file. Now we'll still get these errors here because these are all non-existent variables, but we'll fix this soon. Or actually, we can fix this immediately by simply accepting these missing variables as parameters here. That would be one way of solving this. So we could expect this method to receive the initial investment, which should be a number, the duration, which should be a number, and I want numbers here even though we get strings from the inputs, but I expect the converted values here, and we'll have to make sure that we do convert them in some other place in our code. And I also expect to get the expected return here, which should be a number, and the annual investment, which should be a number. And of course, the order of these parameters is up to you. But the order is also the problem here. Since I have 4 parameters, whenever we call this method, we have to remember the order. So we could simplify this by actually wrapping those parameters between curly braces, so that we actually expect to get one single parameter, which should be an object with these properties. Now we just have to be careful because this is now actually the type definition that defines the shape of this object. We of course also must give this object a name like data, and then add a colon to make it clear that this object type here describes the shape of this data parameter. So the data parameter should be an object with this shape, so with these properties of these types. And now, of course, we need these properties here. So we could, for example, destructure them here by using this JavaScript destructuring syntax, where we point at the object that should be destructured, and we then have curly braces on the left side of the equal sign to pull out those different properties and to store them in separate constants. Like this. That would be one way of accepting this input value here in this calculate investment results method in this app component. Now we're not done returning the annual data here won't do anything, and the method is not getting called right now, but it's an important first step.